Margaret Sanger was an early feminist and women's rights activist and believed in human rights for women and all people. She believed that women and all people are entitled to sexual pleasures and fulfillment and also entitled to Planned Parenthood. She attended college and became a nurse on the Lower East Side, a predominantly poor immigrant neighborhood. Through her work, Sanger treated a number of women who had undergone back alley abortions or tried to self terminate their pregnancies. Sanger started her campaign to educate women about sex in 1912 by writing a newspaper column called What Every Girl Should Know. Sanger said, "No woman can call herself free who does not own and control her body. No woman can call herself free until she can choose consciously whether she will or will not be a mother." Sanger focused her work on one basic principle: every child should be a wanted child. Her grandson, Alexander Sanger, said that she believed that women wanted their children to be free of poverty and disease. Her grandson also stated that birth control, which would limit the number of children and improve their quality of life, was the way to accomplish this. Margaret Sanger believed that no god nor no master should have control over a woman's body. I have attached the glimpse of the article stating that Margaret Sanger is the woman rebel, no gods, no masters. She also stated that every woman should be absolute mistress of her own body, and that woman must have her freedom, the fundamental freedom of choosing whether or not she will be a mother and how many children she will have. Regardless of what man's attitude may be, that problem is hers, and before it can be his, it is hers alone. In 1914, Sanger started a feminist publication called The Woman Rebel, promoting a woman's right to have birth control. The monthly magazine landed her in trouble, though, as it was illegal to send out information on contraception through the mail. This was through the Comstock Act of 1873 by Anthony Comstock. Sanger was against the Comstock Act, and she believed that the only way to change the law was to break the law. And here I have included a photo of Margaret Sanger covers her mouth in protest after being denied the right to talk about birth control. Rather than face a possible 5-year jail sentence, Sanger fled to England. In 1915, Sanger returned to the United States after charges against her had dropped. In 1916, she opened the first birth control clinic in the United States, but was arrested during a raid on the Brooklyn clinic 9 days after it opened. But after Sanger and her sisters spent 30 days in jail for breaking the Comstock Law, she scored a victory for the birth control movement. Later in 1921, Sanger established the American Birth Control League and Planned Parenthood Federation of America. In 1923, while with the League, she opened the first legal birth control clinic in the United States. And in 1929, the committee sought to make it legal for doctors to freely distribute birth control. After returning from a short-lived retirement in Arizona, she worked on birth control issues in Europe and Asia. Later, she established the International Planned Parenthood Federation in 1952. Luckily, Sanger lived to see another important reproductive rights milestone in 1965, when the Supreme Court made birth control legal for married couples in its decision on Griswold versus Connecticut. Margaret Sanger died a year after the decision on Griswold versus Connecticut. Across the nation, though, there are numerous women's health clinics that carry the Sanger name.
Alice was born January 11, 1885, in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Her parents are William and Tacy Paul. Tacy would take Alice to the meetings of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, or the NAWSA. She grew up Quaker, and they believed in the equality of the sexes. She went on and got a degree in biology at Swarthmore College, which her grandfather had founded. After, she went to England. She joined the suffragists there, Christabel Pankhurst and her family, who were leading the movement in Europe. She was imprisoned for being a part of this movement and would hold hunger strikes and would later be forcibly fed. Her motto was, "Resistance to tyranny is obedience to God." England's suffragist movements were working, and Paul went back to America. She believed she could take what she had learned in Europe and transfer it to America. So she went back to school and joined the NAWSA. She was appointed head of the congressional committee in charge of working for a federal suffrage amendment. She headed to Washington, D.C. with Lucy Burns and Crystal Eastman, and like in England, she organized public events to gain national attention. They held a parade on March 3, 1913, and they marched up Pennsylvania Avenue. This parade coincided with Woodrow Wilson's inauguration. The parade turned bad as onlookers attacked the suffragists. Police stood by and watched. Paul severed ties with the NAWSA and formed the National Women's Party, or the NWP, in 1916. They picketed in front of the White House. After a while, the women were arrested for obstructing traffic, a bogus charge, and were jailed when they refused to pay the fine. In jail, she protested by doing hunger strikes and eventually was forcibly fed again. News spread of how she was being treated, and politicians and the public demanded release. Woodrow Wilson announced his support for a suffrage amendment. In 1919, the House and Senate passed the 19th Amendment. 3/4 of the states needed to ratify the amendment. It came down to the state of Tennessee, and in the summer of 1920, Tennessee ratified the 19th Amendment. In 1923, she announced she would be working on a new amendment calling for absolute equality. The bill was introduced from 1923 till 1972 when it was passed. It needed to be ratified, and Congress put a deadline on it of 1982, and it fell short. Each year it comes before Congress, and current efforts are underway to ratify the amendment. As of right now, we are one state short of ratification. Afterwards, Paul went on to receive 3 law degrees, and she worked throughout the entire world fighting for women's rights everywhere she went. She eventually died on July 9, 1977, near her home place in New Jersey. After she died, the Alice Paul Institute was founded in 1985 and currently works to educate and encourage women to take leadership roles in their communities. Betty Friedan was born February 4, 1921, in Peoria, Illinois. Her father was Harry Goldstein, who was a Russian immigrant and a jeweler. Her mother was Miriam Goldstein, a Hungarian immigrant and journalist. Betty graduated from Smith College in 1942 with a degree in psychology. She also graduated summa cum laude. She was interested in women's rights, and she had many press and radio jobs. Betty married Carl Friedan in 1947, and together they had 3 children. She wrote a book called The Feminine Mystique in 1963, and it became an instant bestseller. She helped found the National Organization for Women and served as their first president. She held several leadership jobs in which she fought for abortion rights and women's equality. She helped women find their voice and helped change outdated laws. She died February 4th, 2006.
American Women's Suffrage Association. Flashback. NASA was created in 1890 when the National Women's Suffrage Association and the American Women's Suffrage Association merged together. The first leaders of this new organization were Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and Lucy Stone. The goal of this new organization was to get Congress to pass a federal amendment. They also pursued new members and winning the vote for women. Legends of Women's Suffrage. This is a photo from the International Gathering of Women's Suffrage in 1888. These advocates gathered in Washington, D.C. Seated left to right was Alice Scotchard, Susan B. Anthony, Isabel Boeglet, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Matilda Jocelyn Gage, and Baroness Alexandra Grafenberg. The Winning Plan. This was the final phase of this organization's plan. It was a plan devised by Carrie Chapman Catt to secure women's suffrage in at least 36 states. Once that was completed, they could ratify a federal amendment. Then women voters could try and convince their representatives to pass the constitutional amendment. This led to the passing of the 19th Amendment. The 19th Amendment. This amendment states, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." This was the beginning of change. The aftermath. After the 19th Amendment was passed, women's position in the world did not change very much, but it was still a step in the right direction. Women not voting on a block didn't allow for much change in the elections. As for immigrant women, they were still denied citizenship and still oppressed by voter laws. On the positive side, millions of women were able to vote. Candidates were interested in these new votes, which opened the door for change. National Organization for Women. In June of 1966, Betty Friedan and others gathered in Washington, D.C. in frustration of the world's views on women's rights. This became the first unofficial assembly of what is now referred to as NOW. The history of NOW. Throughout time, feminists such as Miss H. Griswold, Susan B. Anthony, Emma Goldman, and Margaret Sanger had fought for women's rights. After the Second World War, this movement had begun to descend until the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Then the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was founded in 1965 to help enforce women's rights, but ended up deciding job advertisement discrimination was permissible. Then came the Third National Conference of Commissions on the Status of Women. Betty Friedan, Dr. Pauli Murray of Yale, and attorney Sonia Finetz were all attending this conference. These women, along with 15 to 20 more, assembled at a hotel one night during the trip. This was the start of NOW. A new movement. By October of 1966, 300 men and women had joined the movement. It is now the largest feminist organization in the U.S. NOW's purpose is to take action through intersectional grassroots activism to promote feminist ideals, lead societal change, eliminate discrimination, and achieve and protect the equal rights of all women and girls in all aspects of social, political, and economic life. Through mass marches and other tactics, this organization has changed women's rights forever. They have opened the door for women to receive political positions, more education, equal employment opportunities, and have pushed the laws that fight against violence, harassment, and discrimination in women. Now or never. This image shows women gathered at a Now March to voice their opinions about women's rights. The change. Now is an organization that is still going strong. They focus on a variety of issues including economic justice, family law, term paper health, marriage and family formation rights of same-sex couples, representation of women in the media, and global feminist issues. This organization has hundreds of thousands of supporting members in all 50 states who are currently fighting the oppression of women. This organization has found much success in several aspects and has helped women all over the world voice their opinions.